Okay, should be able to hear me now. Okay, that's good. 1 second. Should be okay. Um, yeah, again, while we're going to this Q&A. So question came in about livelihood, which question comes up quite a bit. And the question seemingly is that if I'm doing something for livelihood and other people, let's say, doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. And or let's say even better. Let's say you're doing something, you've done it before. You made money doing it before. And now that's not the case. Either you're losing money, making less money, right? Whatever it may be. So the question is, why does this happen? Right? So simple answer is there's got to be a block somewhere that if someone's doing, let's say someone is doing something other people are doing, and all things being equal, and people are making money, it's not a downtime in the economy. There are no other, let's say, factors involved in general why a person should be losing out or not making as much or whatever. Again, it's not because of customer service, not because of advertising, not because maybe of any of these things. I mean, it could be in theory, but let's say it's none of these things, right? So what would be the cause? So if a person's in the field, they don't make money, they don't make too much money, but that's the nature of the field, okay, right? So that's normal, right? That we wouldn't think there's anything wrong with. But if someone is doing, let's say someone is putting their best foot forward, and that's our obligation. Someone is putting their best foot forward and things still aren't going, then it's whatever. It could be a number of things. One, it could be because of sin, what a person does, right? So therefore, God's penalizing them for sins that they've done, and therefore He's hitting them in the pocket, right? That's one possibility. Second possibility could be that maybe it doesn't have to do with their sin in general or something they might have done. Maybe it has to do with a previous reincarnation. In other words, the soul has to be back in this world, and the soul has to be paid back for certain things it did previously. So therefore, what's going to happen? The soul will pay the price, right? The soul will pay the price somehow in this world. In other words, the soul has to come back for whatever reason, and certain things it has to go through. So maybe it has nothing to do with what you've done per se. Maybe it's what your soul's done. Okay, that's the second possibility. And the third possibility is, what does God want here? What does God want here? He doesn't want you to be successful. Why not? Again, we gave two possibilities, but God is the big X factor over here. So therefore, since God is the big X factor, obviously, right? Obviously, He wants you to suffer over here. So those are two possibilities. There's a third. Now, there's a third thing over here, and I'll give over what Rabbi said over to me when I was involved in real estate, doing things that everyone else is doing, and people were making money. It's before I sort of tried to do things on my own, right? The person I took a course with had a whatever specific way of doing things. So I hear people on these calls once a week. People making money, and you can do this in any market and whatever. And it wasn't going. So they called my rabbi. I told him, listen, I'm doing this and doing that. I haven't veered off doing, step by step. So he said you must have some sort of block in heaven. So the advice he gave was to say Hataras Nadar. to say to nullification of vows, but with one caveat. Normally you say nullification of vows. When do you say it? You say right before Rosh Hashanah. Right? Most people do it probably the day before Rosh Hashanah. They don't do it the day before Rosh Hashanah. They can do it on Rosh Hashanah itself. Right? They certainly do it on Rosh Hashanah. But or anytime before Yom Kippur. Right? For that matter. But let's say so he told me like this, say a Taurus Nadarim, right? You take three people, you say a nullification of vows with one caveat. In most prayer books, you will not find nullification of vows with curses. Meaning there's a whole separate thing, or whatever number of paragraphs to say for curses, right? Someone who may have cursed you, let's say. So he told me, get three people together, form a basement, right? Form a rabbinical court. People keep Shabbos, whatever. Form a rabbinical court, and that's what you should do. And then tell me what happens afterward. So I said, all right. So I said, does it matter if I do it during the day, during the night? He said, no. It doesn't matter either way. So he told me, okay, that's what you should do. So I got three people together later that day. And I said, I'm not telling you why I'm doing this, but this is what he told me to do. And it's only in certain prayer books where you have the version of Torah Sadarim of nullification of vows. It's only in certain prayer books that has an added thing for curses. So I got three people together. It doesn't take very long. It takes like 5-10 minutes, whatever. And I said, this is what he told me to do. This is what he told me to do. So that's what I did. And shortly thereafter, not very long after, things started to move. I didn't close the deal straight away, but whatever. Things had started to move and in a major way. Now, after this started happening, I called him back and he said, you did what I said? I said, yeah. He said, what happened? I said, things are moving now. I said, I haven't closed the deal yet, but whatever. Working on this, working on that. I got a number of things in the pipeline and, things are moving. So I asked him, how did you know? How did you know that was the case? So he said, if a person is working and doing something that other people doing the exact same thing, all things being equal, they should be able to make money, right? So again, a person can say, well, they're not good at customer service, they might not good at this, something else might have happened, whatever. But in general, right? In general, if you're doing the same thing, logically, then why are you not making any money like everyone else is? So if this works in any market, right, which it does, yeah, if it works in any market, there's nothing to stop it, right? There's nothing to stop it. So what's stopping it over here, right? So he said it must be there's some sort of block in heaven. He didn't come out and say, you must have sinned, you must have done something wrong, right? But even a person sins doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get hit that hard, right? You might, right? But, he didn't bring that up as an option. Not thinking, you're not saying, you're the most righteous of anybody, so therefore, God's going to open the floodgates, so it must be something you must have done. He didn't say that, right? He said you must have some sort of block in heaven, according to logic. Why is it logical? Because if you're doing the similar thing that other people are doing, and they're making money, and you're not, there's something wrong. There is some sort of block. Now, if somebody's doing something, let's say, and they're making mistakes, or, they're not careful, or, they're negligent or something like that. So a person can't ask, why is this happening to me? Why not? Because you see, there's something else going on. There's negligence. Why are you being negligent? A different question, right? But if you see there's negligence, if you see that, a person's not careful, which is a similar thing, right? That, that they're not careful, or, there are other things going on, well, then you wouldn't necessarily ask the question. You'll ask a different question. You'll say, why do I keep falling into this trap? Why, and that could be because God wants you to fail. So therefore, a person's giving us their evil inclination. They're doing things maybe they wouldn't, they heard from other people, whatever it is, that they're doing, but they're not, they're not doing what they should be doing. In other words, they're getting bad advice, let's say. So they're going on that bad advice. You can say, but these people are supposed to know what they're doing. Can a person get scammed? Yeah. Why would a person get scammed? Because God wants them to lose. A person can be as careful as they want, they'll still get scammed, right? You see by Yaakov Avinu, right? He wakes up in the morning, finds out it's Leah. There's no possible way, according to logic, that he should not have married Rachel, right? He had no idea that Rachel passed on the sign that was only between him and Rachel, so he wouldn't get swindled. But his own wife, his own potential wife, right, swindled him in a certain way. Yeah, he got swindled, right? So that didn't go according to logic. That should never have happened, right? So there is, just throw this out there, there is a halachic question my Rabbi brings up, and the halachic question is when a person gets married, right? When a Jew gets married and under the chuppah, under the canopy, he gives over a ring and he says, you are sanctified to me. Gedas Moshe Yisrael, right? Right? The law of Moses and the Jewish people. Very good. Who does he have intention for? He has intention for that woman. That woman is under the canopy, right? Very good, right? He's got he's got what's it called? He has, who does he want to marry? This woman. That's who he wants to marry. Right? So therefore, since that's what he wants to marry, very good. He doesn't have intention for anybody else. But he has to have intention for the one he wants to marry. So who did Yaakov want to marry? Rachel. Who does he end up marrying? Leah. So how can he be married? He never had intention for Leah. Right? According to Torah, you have to have intention over here. Since he had intention for the wrong person, he should have been married. Never should have been good. Right? So Rabbi asks the question, why is it good? So he saw that the Jewish people and, the future Jewish people, that are going to come out of Yaakov, right? He saw that Leah is supposed to have children through him. So therefore it was good. So it's like after the fact, you're going to say it's good. Why? Because he saw that according to nature, this never should have happened, right? And therefore, if this is what God wanted, and this is how it was orchestrated, then that means after the fact, he really had intention for her, right? Otherwise, you run into a major problem, right? In other words, he could never be married to her, right? That the marriage is a false marriage here because you have to have intention for the person you marry, right? So in such a case, that's what he is. There are other answers as well, right? But again, in this case, what do I have? What do I have? In other words, the issue is, it's not about, a person's in the field doesn't make money, right? That'd be obvious, right? 100%, right? 100%, that would be obvious. So what do we say? It must be there's something else going on. So simple answer would be, maybe not doing the same thing, right? Maybe you veered off. Maybe, there are other things going on, but let's say they're not. So in general, if not, we could say, well, maybe, it's what your soul has to go through, but he didn't entertain that possibility either. So he said there must be a block somewhere, right? There must be some sort of block in heaven that's not allowing the spiritual influence to come through, right? That somehow there's some sort of block. Now, what? So he told me, so say, so get rid of these vows. Maybe it's not just getting rid of the vows that he said. He said it could be somebody cursed you. Yeah, and if someone cursed you, yeah, very hard to get that curse off, right? In general. So therefore, what do? You go in front of three people, and they get rid of the curse, right? Through the nullification of vows, they get rid of this curse, right? And so shortly thereafter, I mean, eventually I did close the deal, right? Whatever, it took a while. Took a while for the first one to close, but doesn't matter. Things started to move. Um, then and then many months later you had the mortgage crash of 2008. So and a lot of people a lot of people that I was involved with were buying properties through credit, through their credit score and whatever and rent it, and then it's very hard to get mortgages after that. So like the whole crash after that, right? So that's one thing, right? That is, so there are a number of possibilities, right? So, again, he didn't entertain the first two, right? But really, what should be the answer? The answer should be in general, that's I gotta repent, I gotta be better, right? Again, what happens where let's say a person works for a company. Again, there's no guarantee for anything either. Person works for a company, something happens, the company's been solvent for, let's say, 15, 20 years. Something happens, and then all of a sudden, company goes under, or the company falters. You can say, oh, what did I do wrong? Well, this is part of nature. This happens. Companies don't last 50 years, 70 years. I mean, sometimes, they can last a while. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying, a person works for a company, the company's going to go under within a year or 2 years or 5 years. It can happen. I know someone worked for a company had issues, got laid off, and worked for another company, same thing happens, right? Over time. Like, so what do you say about that? Nothing. It can happen, right? That's not to say, well, gotta look at my actions, gotta see what happened. That's what happened, right? It's kind of uncanny, it happened, like one after the other, but in general, we're not going to say it's something necessarily the person did, right? You can say, well, it's quote unquote their bad luck. The company went under. They worked for a company, they did okay, and then whatever happened to the company. So, there could be other factors involved. There definitely could be, other factors involved, but again, in general, if someone's doing what other people are doing and they're making money and you're not, then yeah, then there's something else. Then there has to be something else going on because that's not normal, right? And if something should work in any place, right? Any country, any continent, it's not going to matter. Well, maybe except Antarctica. Yeah, pretty much anywhere. Whatever it is should work, and other people it's working, and by you it doesn't work. So there's something going on. That there probably is definitely something going on. If it's something where person's in a profession, they don't make a lot of money, right? So a person can't say, why not? Why am I not making a lot of money? Well, it's very simple because you're in a profession that doesn't. That's not, that's not really, it's not really the question, right? But there's a separate question here, right? Which we mentioned. The separate question is if a person's doing things to shoot themselves in the foot. That's a much bigger problem, right? Or I shouldn't say bigger problem. It's a different problem. Why is it a different problem? Because then a person has to figure out why you're doing this. Yeah, why you're making this mistake. Or what's causing what's causing it, right? So that's a different question, right? That's a very that's a very, very different, question. Why are they being more negligent? Why, they made a mistake. I know someone, worked for a certain company for years, for many, many years. And whatever, they made a mistake. They made a mistake in something. And they were on this person. They made a pretty, I don't know what the mistake was. I don't think it really matters, but they made a pretty egregious, a pretty egregious a pretty egregious mistake. And because they made a pretty egregious mistake, the company was then, watching them, with a fine tooth comb because, they made a serious mistake. So eventually, this person got let go, right? I mean, actually, in the end, they were pretty happy it happened and whatever. But that can also happen. That can also happen. So, if a person's not, careful or not on top of their game, let's say, they make a mistake. Okay, how many mistakes company going to let a person make? Right? It depends what the mistake is. Right? Well, a person got negligent, whatever. They're going to watch them. They're going to see. If they see they make a number of mistakes, they'll get fired. Right? Now, a person has to remember, even if that happens, even if a person made, whatever mistake it was, a door, that door may close. That door certainly can close, but other doors will definitely empty. Will definitely be open. Yeah, and I've seen it myself that things can look very bleak. You can put your best foot forward. Do something you don't want to do, whatever. Company lets you go, and you say, okay, now what? Did what I didn't want to do. Can't get unemployment. Like, what are you gonna do? Right now, what are you gonna do? Right. So I went back to do what I was doing. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of doors opened up. Very short amount of time afterward, within a few weeks. Yeah. Was it expected? No. Definitely not expected. Not only wasn't expected, if I would tell you based on track record, I would tell you, if I would say, oh, this is gonna happen, you know, this is gonna happen. Yeah, I would say that it's not even wishful thinking, right? Person has a track record, right? Let's say person has a track record, and they know month to month, more or less how much they make, right? Sometimes more, sometimes less. You know, sometimes even if you make more money, sometimes you have more expenses, whatever it may be. But person knows more or less. Yeah, person's independent, so you got to hustle to get clients, this, that. Okay, but sometimes it's slower, sometimes it's better, right? It offsets. Eventually, it offsets. But if if over 2-year period, 3-year period, 5-year period, yeah, consistently more or less what the track record is. It doesn't change that much, right? It doesn't change that much. That could be you could do more, make more money, whatever it is, but it doesn't change, right? Essentially, it doesn't change. So now, if you're going to say this is going to change, right? You're going to say you're dreaming. You're absolutely dreaming because you have a track record, right? So I said to myself, I give you a month. We'll give you a month. We'll see where it goes. Keep my ears and eyes open. See where it goes. Yeah. I'm not going to give myself much more than that, but okay. Put my best foot forward. Go back to do what I was doing before. Let's see. Let's see where it goes. Within 2 weeks, floodgates open. Almost. Yeah. Why? Can't answer. I don't even have a bad answer. I put my best foot forward. Could be potentially, reward for doing something I didn't want to do. Yeah. Could be. Don't know. I don't have a good answer. I don't really have an answer at all. right? But it changed. Now, if you were to ask me again, was that expected? No. Would have been expected? No. 5 years would have been expected? No. So what happened? Don't know. I don't have an answer. But at the end of the day, God wants to change something. He can, out of nowhere. He certainly can. Yeshua's Hashem Kerafayin, right? The salvation of God comes the blink of an eyelash, right? Could be someone does something, unbelievable thing of self-sacrifice. God says, okay, I'm going to give you a reward for that. That's impressive. I'm going to reward you for that. Yeah. And he opens doors. But you got to remember, when the door shuts, in general, it doesn't mean all the doors are shut. There will be a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, in my case, I could have said, okay, get unemployment for a little bit, explore my options, different things. I couldn't even do that, right? I didn't work there long enough. So, I didn't even have that option. Okay. So, how much time do you give it? Probably don't give it that much time. But something obviously changed. Yeah, maybe more exposure, maybe more. It could be any number of things, but if I was doing the same thing before, and I'm doing the same thing afterwards, and the results are what they are, they shouldn't change dramatically. Maybe, go up here, go up there, maybe. But they're not going to go up exponentially. They're not going to replace salary, which it wasn't a great salary, but it's not going to replace the salary within a week and a half, 2 weeks, or like triple it. Not even, if you would have asked me those odds, I tell you, probably zero. Zero. Yeah. Not because of my personality, not because of anything. Not going to happen. According to nature. Yeah, never going to happen. Never going to happen. So why did it happen? Anyone's, guess as good as mine. Don't know. There was nothing significant that was done that should have changed anything. I'm not complaining. I don't have an answer. I definitely don't have an answer. So, when things start to go south, they're not going to go south forever. It might be hard. Certainly might be hard, no question. But at the end of the day, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If doors close or a door closed, other doors open. And other doors get open in a major way. You don't know. A person goes in for a job and it's a perfect job for them. They don't get it. Perfect schedule, good money, benefits, all these things. Someone else gets the job. The person's devastated. Devastated. Because they think this is what I should be doing. This is the ultimate, job I should be doing. Yeah, down the line, they get another job. Yeah, let's say. But in the end, it turned out better than what they had before. What they thought they were going to get. It happened. It for sure happened. Again, can a person be, stuck in a dead-end job? Yeah. And it goes nowhere. And yeah, 100%. 100%. But at the end of the day, those challenges make us who we are. That's what happened. When I had all my money stolen, I wanted to build what I wanted to build. And I still want to build eventually. Yeah, so I could have been successful. I think I would have been. Yeah, but 20 years later, it was about 20 years later, life experience, knowledge, and other things make me 10 times more equipped. 10 times more equipped to do what I want to do. Now, the question can be, okay, but you got to go through the ringer to get to that. Okay. And God didn't tell me 20 years later this is what's going to happen or whatever. Okay. Still need plenty of money to do it. Okay, doesn't matter. Right? But, what I have to bring to the table now is very, very different. Very, very different. Now, that being the case, it's a whole different thing. Now, would I have signed up for that? No. Not something I wouldn't necessarily signed up for, but that's the reality. Right? So you see, the challenges that a person has, it makes them who they are, and they can be successful in other ways because of the challenges they went through. Right? Whether it's financial or not, it doesn't matter. right? They can bring, so many other things to the table because of the struggles they went through. And that, so a person could go through that and say, oh, but I suffered this way, I suffered that way, right? But the person now, because of what they went through, made them 10 times stronger. And they wouldn't have been 10 times stronger had they not gone through it, right? But what would someone say? Well, I would have rather not gone through it. Okay. Very good. You know, everyone's a Monday morning quarterback. Beautiful. But we're not always given that, we're not given that choice, right? But at the end of the day, did it make us who we are? It absolutely made us who we are. And we're better off because of it. But you remember, there were dark days. Yeah. 100%. There were dark days. But that forms who we are. Wouldn't it be better not to go through it? So we pray every day, don't bring me to trials and tribulations. True. At the same time, it's kind of an oxymoron because if if you're praying every day, don't bring me to trials and tribulations, you don't grow without them. You don't grow spiritually without them. Kind of a lie in a certain way. Yeah. Because we don't want them. Because trials and tribulations bring us down. Trials and tribulations, are painful. 100%, they're painful. So at the end of the day, what do I have? You'll say, I better not to have them. Okay. But even you can tell me it's better not to have them. You don't grow without them. So it's a catch-22. It's a catch-22. But most people would say, as hard as a trial may be, once they've gone through it and they're past it, or even if it's still going on, let's say, at some level, what have they gained? Are they different from it? Do they become better from it? Do they become stronger from it? In most cases, the answer is 100% yes. But they went through tremendous pain, right? Sometimes, I'll give an example. Somebody, I think I told the story before. Somebody had worked, whatever, many, many years. Put money into an IRA. And whatever, they missed kids' birthday parties, worked overtime, this, that, thinking, which, not saying they shouldn't have thought this, thinking what's going to happen. They retire, they got this nest egg, see the world, travel, this, that, and okay, then, that was their time in this world. So what happened? Something went wrong with the IRA. IRA went bust. And so now, obviously, they're older, they can't work as much, this and that. And now the poverty stricken at the end of the way. So now the person says, wait a minute. Yeah, this person, was a thinking person. And they said, I worked my whole life. I worked 30, 40 years, whatever it is. I work like a dog, tooth and nail, right? Work like an absolute dog. And I got nothing to show for it. Right? Money-wise, I have nothing to show for it. Well, they'll make a big distinction here. What broke the Jews back in Egypt? Besides all the suffering they went through, they were building things that eventually were going to collapse. So all the things they were doing, or a lot of things they were doing at no point. That broke them. Egyptians knew that. That broke them. Because what they did had no purpose. Right? This, the person would say, had a purpose. What was the purpose of working all that time and missing birthday parties and this and that and family time? Right? What was the purpose? For the end. The end was the purpose. They can relax. They don't have to work hard. They can live off the rest of their money. They can go travel, go see the world, and then okay, then they die. Right? Then they die. Very good. But they realized, just like the Jews in Egypt, all the work they're doing was for nothing. Was for nothing. Yeah. So this person got the message. Miraculously so. Not bitter per se, but understood. Understood their whole life was meaningless. Up until this point. Because they work, put all this money aside. You're gonna have all this money later. Beautiful. Yeah. And everything went south. Everything went south. Person, was broken, was certainly broken by it. Till I worked my whole life, I have nothing to show for it. Right? Financially, nothing to show for it. It's devastating. Totally devastating. But they got the point. No one should have to go through such a thing. But they got the point. That's all life is. That's all life's about. Okay, you got to put bread on the table. Person's got to work, right? That's curse when Adam and Eve ate from the tree, right? B'zdei is apecha. You got to work for your bread, right? By the sweat of your brow. You have to work. That's what people have to do, right? We don't have a choice. You got to work. Okay, but you can have balance, right? You have to have balance. It's not all about work, family, or God. It's about character traits. It's about a lot of things that are much more important. But this you have to do anyway. You have to have balance. You have to know how to have a balance. It can't be all consuming, so to speak. So the person got the message. They got the message. Now, other people would be bitter. They'd say, woe to me, look what happens. Lost everything. They could have been bitter, totally bitter. Some people could have committed suicide, could have been, drugged the rest of their life, put in, psychological problems, other, depression, other things. But this person said, okay, there has to be a reason here. There has to be a reason. Can't be that it just happened, by mistake or, whatever, because this is a person's whole life. Yeah. Their whole life they see in their 60s as one big zero. One big zero. You can say, but, making money and all that and, working hard, it's not a zero. Okay. They didn't have a life. They didn't have a life. They barely had family life. Barely saw their kids, barely saw their spouse, this, that. They paid a price. They paid that price. Thinking the price was worth to be paid for the sake of what was going to be later. And come to find out, later is zero. And devastating. Absolutely devastating. And you see people also, we've spoken about this, before. I see a bunch of questions, I'll take them in a second. But you see that, there are people that are built up, and, they finally make it and they get squashed. And something happens. One bad investment, whatever, everything gone. Right? Or whatever. You see the sports world all the time. Someone's coming up on a contract, they do something stupid, caught on video, goes viral. That's it, finished. Building up to make, millions of dollars. They did something stupid, they got caught. I'm saying all the time, or they got injured, or, something else happened. Right? But imagine being built up, and then you have the legs cut out from under you. That's devastating. Person understands the risks and this and that. Okay. Someone plays football, professional football, the average lifespan is like 2 years, 3 years. Not that they die, they get injured. Yeah, they can't play anymore. So they know they have a limited amount of time. But imagine if they last, and they're up for a nice size contract. Forget about the end result, whether, too many concussions, other things. They'll still say it's worth it, but, they're up for this and then either get injured or they do something stupid and they lose it. And they lose everything. Yeah. Why would God do that? Payback. Right? It's definitely pay. Oh, you don't think I exist? You don't think this? You think you're doing everything? Okay. I'll wait. I'm patient. You're not coming back to me? I'm gonna nail you. It can happen that way also. It's worse, I would say, if you do it to yourself. If you do it to yourself, you keep shooting yourself in the foot. That a person has to get a grip on. That a person has to figure out why is this happening? Yeah, because if it's something that occurs, it continually occurs, then a person is going to have to find out what's going on. You can't say, well, why is God doing this? He's not doing it. You're shooting yourself in the foot. Why are you shooting yourself in the foot? That's the question. Right? That would be the question. Let me take some We'll take some questions here. Can annulment be over the phone? Oh, or live in person? And he asked about, he said, one second. He said not this year. You seem to have some curse and I don't know if a person has a curse or not. You can do it anytime. You're just blowing you off, right? But you can do it anytime. Yeah. Right, Rabbi said, it was it was the middle of the year. It wasn't summer. I don't remember. I don't remember. I think it was in the middle of the year. It was in the middle of the year this happened. Yeah, that has nothing to do with whether it's close to Rosh Hashanah or not. But you know, you get three Jews together, you could do it in front of them. Yeah, can be done over the phone. It should be done in person. Should be done in person. In theory, it could be done over the phone. Be done over Zoom. Yeah, it's not. It's not something that you know. It could be. It could be done over the phone. Probably. Yeah, I don't think it's an issue. Better do it in person, but it doesn't have to be. I don't think it has to be. I mean, it's definitely better because when you have a base, then you have three people there, three physical people there, not just in virtual reality, right? That would be a question. Is that considered like they're there or not? Probably it's better to do it in person. It'd be better to do it in person. But someone's gonna say, no, you don't have to do it till next year, whatever. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying that's the answer I got. That's the answer he told, right? He said you have a block, if you're doing what this again, this is a very specific case. The case was, you, meaning me, was doing something other people were doing in the same field, exact same field. Yeah, they were making money and I wasn't. Now, it wasn't like I was making a little bit of money, this, that. I'm making no money, right? Spending time, advertising, other things, nothing is going, right? It's the same exact thing other people were doing. Now, on these calls, we have a call once a week. And people calling in would say, yeah, I made this deal, I was doing this and whatever. And, I'm not tooting my own horn, at all. These people weren't the brightest of people, right? Let's just say. They weren't the brightest of people. And they're making money. So a curse or a block over him, in this case, this specific case, where you're doing the exact same thing other people are doing. It's not a downtime. It's not something you can pinpoint personality wise. You don't talk to people so well in your job. This, whatever. We're talking about you doing what other people do, and they're making money and you're not. So now I'll tell you the truth. When I told some people, I didn't tell them why I was doing this. Now, the reason, the reason that, first of all, I've never heard, anyone suggest such a thing either in such a case. Now, they would have done it anyway because I asked them to do it. But when I told them who told me to do it, they didn't question. They thought it was weird. 100% they thought it was strange, that he said to do this, but you're talking, right now, the Torah giant of the generation. The Torah giant of the generation. So that's what he said. But again, people have been religious more than, many years longer than me. They thought it was strange. If I would have told the other people, which I have told the story over, they also thought it was strange. Yeah. Right? It's not a normal answer you would necessarily get. Yeah. If you would ask most, Orthodox rabbis, they're going to say, why would you do that? So, maybe I have a curse. A lot of people are not worried about curses today. Yeah. Like, they're not worried about an ayin hara either. 99% of people, the Gemara says, die because of an ayin hara, because of an evil eye. Right? It's also brought down, if you don't believe it, it doesn't affect you. Yeah? So, some rabbis will tell you, you don't have to worry about it. Forget it. You don't have to worry about it. I spoke, whatever, many, many weeks. Pirkei Avos, ethics of our fathers about jealousy. That's what an ayin hara is. Right? So some people would say, that's no big deal, don't worry about it. Vast majority would say, don't worry about it. there are people that, yeah, are worried about it, and do take it seriously. A lot of people don't take it seriously. Yeah. So what should you do? It's your choice. It's your choice. Person wants to take it seriously. You got to be very careful. You don't want to take it seriously. You don't really have to worry about it. Right? My Rabbi happened to take it very seriously, and he's very big into these things. Not everybody is. Right? But again, if you would tell any Orthodox rabbi, yeah, you can tell them a story. You can tell them my story. They're gonna say that's a weird answer. That's what they're gonna say. It's a strange answer to give. Yeah, but it doesn't matter because look at the end result. You know, he is the Torah giant, and these other people aren't. But again, even someone, I told the story to a number of people. No, not so small people either. Rabbinic scholars, and they're like, "Really? He said that?" I said, I said, yeah, that's what he said. And he said, so what happened? I told him the story. He said, wow, it's an amazing story. But it's a huge novelty to say such a thing. Most people would not say that. So the rabbi would say, oh, don't worry about it until next year. Probably most people will not take you seriously. Right? And that, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you being a non-Jew or not. And, I don't think it really has that much to do with it. Right? If I would tell them the story and I'd say, what about saying Hatar Sadar, getting rid of a curse? They'd probably laugh in a certain way. Right? They'd probably say, why would you do that? Well, maybe I have a curse. Oh yeah. Most people don't hold of it. They're not worried about it. So why is it in some prayer books? Why is it in some prayer books? Because there are people that are worried about it. So they have it. So they definitely have it. So I can tell you, I can tell you from what I see when people do a Torah Sadarim, right before Rosh Hashanah, right? Vast majority of people do not say the curses. They don't say the curses. It takes longer or whatever, but they don't do it. Right? So if someone gets blown off and says, nah, don't worry about it, this and that, that's because it wouldn't be a normal thing to do. Right? When I heard him say, I've heard him say a number of things that most people probably wouldn't say, right? For other things, I'm not going to go into, but I heard him say a number of things. I'm like, really? He said, yeah, try this, right? Or do that. Yeah, some things I told other people, some things I didn't, but, some people certainly would have said, really? They would have scratched their head and say, he told you that? He said that? Right? So it's not necessarily a person's getting blown off per se, but it's not a normal answer. I'm not saying he's not normal. That's what he told me to do. He knows everything about everything. So yeah, do this. I said, why? He said, just don't ask me why. Just do it. Like he once told me something, and I asked him. I said, wow, it's very interesting. I said, does anyone else hold of that? Does anyone else say the same thing? And he looked at me. He's like, I said it. That's not good enough for you. You need 20 other people to verify what I said? I said, I'm telling you, that's what to do. I'm telling you, that's what the answer is. You want to get other opinions? Go get other opinions. You can do whatever you want. Go get other opinions. That's what he told me. Because I was just curious because, he had told me something. And I said, I thought it was a little bit strange what he said. So I asked him. I said, who else says that? I said, there any other rabbinic authorities say that? Well, he got kind of offended. Yeah. And he said, what? My opinion's not good enough for you? I'm not good enough for you? You got to shop around for other opinions? Yeah, whatever. He hit me over the head. I got the message. But again, you're talking about a different person altogether. A totally different person. Now, people may not agree with him. If I would tell people almost as great as him or whatever, I said, yeah, that's what he told me. Like, come on. Come on, really? Did he say it? Said it. He said it. Yeah. They may say, they may disagree with him. Okay. If I were to ask 10 people in my situation what to do, I don't think any of them would have said to do that. Probably none of the people would have said to do that. Okay, I didn't ask other people. I asked him. I said, what should I do? That's what he told me. People said, people had told me other things. Yeah. So, if a person asked the rabbi and said, "Oh, should I do this?" I'm not gonna say they're gonna laugh at you. Not necessarily gonna laugh at you, but they're not gonna really take it seriously. I don't think. But in either case, that's what he told me to do, and that's what happened. Yeah, that goes in the book. That story goes in the book. It's a good story. Yeah, but most people never would have said that. They would not have said it. That's my point. So someone tells you, "Oh, come on, no, you got next year. Don't worry about it." You say, "Well, I'm worried about an evil eye." So let's tell you what the Gemara says. Even 99% die of it, potentially die of it. If you don't believe it, it doesn't have the same effect. That's what tell you. Tell you not to worry about it. Other people would say, no, you shouldn't worry about it. But, most people would say, don't worry about it. When it comes to an evil eye, I'll tell you one story, right? My was at the coast, I was at the Western Wall, and his daughter told me someone looked at him a certain way, and he felt, I don't know, he didn't feel well afterward. And he felt he had a evil eye. Had someone take care of it. And she said he didn't know the person. Someone looked at him. All of a sudden, like shortly thereafter, he started not feeling well. I was telling someone this story. I happened to tell someone this story. And this person started making fun. Come on, evil eye. No one really believes in it. It doesn't affect you. Doesn't affect you if you don't really believe in it. Blah blah blah. So I said, okay. I said, I said probably true. But I said I will ask you one question. And my one question was, there are 12 signs according to Kabbalah. 12 signs of an evil eye. Yeah, that a person potentially could have the evil eye. So I said, I'm just curious. Do you know any of them? Can you name me one? Can you name me one? That was the end of the conversation. Yeah, I said, you can't name me one. Okay, so you don't take it seriously. Fine. Yeah. But I said, how many people in this generation or from previous generation or from 500 years ago, if somebody looked at them, are going to feel, they're going to feel something wrong with them because someone looked at them? It's a rare person. You count them on one hand how spiritually in tune they are. Some people can poo-poo it and say, nah, it doesn't really mean anything, whatever. But it can affect you, right? It certainly can affect you, right? But again, if you don't believe in it, so it doesn't affect you, right? So a person says, oh, I think I have an evil eye. Most people will say, don't worry about it. Nothing to worry about. Yeah. So you have 3 people are members of the base, then other people in addition. No, 3 kosher Jews. That's all I had. 3 kosher Jews. Keep Shabbos, keep Torah, keep mitzvahs. Doesn't matter if they were religious from birth or not. One of them, I think, was about tshuva. It doesn't matter. As long as they were Jewish. They were Jewish. They can read from a prayer book, right? They keep Torah mitzvahs. That's it. You don't have to get the greatest people of the generation. Get any kosher Jew to do it, right? To answer. That's what you do on right before Rosh Hashanah. And have kids do it that are, over bar mitzvah. Yeah, that's what, when you do a Tar Sadarim, when you do nullification of vows, you do it with 3 people. You could have a 15-year-old there. It still works because they're over the age of bar mitzvah. Yeah. I didn't say I want to do it with kids. I did it with adults, so whatever. But, as long as they keep Torah mitzvah, it doesn't matter. Right? That doesn't matter. How does one deal with the ayin hara? So there are people, what they do is they take your name, they take lead, they boil up lead, and they see from what comes out of the boiled lead, are there any eyes? If there are any eyes, that means the person has an ayin hara. And there's certain things, certain incantations, other things they do to take it off. So I had a number of things happen to me in a short amount of time. I go with my wife to speak to my Rabbi about it. And I asked him, because he's very big in these things. So I asked him, I said, do you think I have an ayin hara? Do you think I have this evil eye? So he looked at me. I mean, he's, not a small person and very, very intense, very intense face. And he looks at me, he's like, no, I don't think. He goes, I know. My wife screamed. Screamed. So he's like, so I said, well, you get somebody who can, help me with this? So yeah, he gave me a number. A certain woman that does it, certain family does it, whatever. Anyway, call up the woman, give her my name, And she's okay. Let me work on this. I'll get back to you. She calls me up, and she's like, "Listen, I don't want to know what's going on in your life. I don't really care, but you should be dead." That's what she told me. She says, "You should not be in this world." And said, so I said, "You're saying I have an ayin hara?" She's like, you have a major ayin hara here." I said, "You can help me? You can take this off?" She's like, "Yeah, I'll work on it. Yeah, I'll get back to you when it's safe." I said, "Okay." I mean, they know what they're doing. People who deal with these things know what they're doing, right? Yeah. I mean, there are some frauds out there probably, but the ones who know what they're doing know what they're doing, right? So all you have to do, a person gives them their name. They do the thing with the lead, and if eyes come out, that means the person has an eye on it. Yeah, you don't have to be there in person. But this person told me, you know, you should be dead. I'm like, thank you very much. Does he have anything nice to say? But that was it. That was, that got taken care of. So then I asked my rabbi, so I moved from one place to another. I said, can it follow you? Or does it stay in one place? Oh, no. He said, it can follow you. Whatever, you go from place to place, doesn't help, right? We say, Shinui Makum, Shinui Mazel. Person changes the place where they live. It can change their, heavily influence. That is true. But if that person has a bad influence somewhere, it could follow you. It could follow you. Yeah. So if I asked them, I moved from one place to another. I had problems in one place and whatever. So so I asked him, I said, can I follow you? He was like, yeah, they can follow you. Doesn't have to start anew. It can follow you also. I'm like, conversation didn't get better from that. Yeah, it didn't get better from that, but whatever. Thank God it was taken care of. But you take it seriously enough, you know, it could literally kill you, literally. Someone would ask me, I think, yeah, I think it's something to be careful of. Most people would tell you, again, I don't want people to quote here, most people will tell you, poo, 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 doesn't mean anything. It's not something to worry about. Is it okay to tell a story about someone who did something bad to you, but not mention who it was? Ah, yeah, about a Jew or a non-Jew, is that Lashon Hara? About a non-Jew, it's not Lashon Hara. But if you would say a story, if you would say a story about someone who did something and someone else figures it out. Yeah, the Chofetz Chaim says the laws of Lashon Hara, even if he didn't say who the person was, but someone else figured out who it was, that's Lashon Hara. Still Lashon Hara. Right? Certainly for a Jew, not for a non-Jew. But for a Jew, it'd still be Lashon Hara. It's called the dust of Lashon Hara. It's called Avak Lashon Hara. But, and that's if, I think it's called Avak Lashon Hara. That's somebody, even if you didn't mention the name, but someone else figured it out. If no one figured it out, then yeah, that's not a problem. Shouldn't be a problem. But if someone would figure it out, then it would be Lashon Hara. But yeah, if it was a Jew, that would be an issue. For a non-Jew, it wouldn't be an issue, right? Even though I'm not going to speak Lashon Hara against anyone, Jew or non-Jew. So a person shouldn't get in the habit of doing it against a non-Jew either. But technically, it wouldn't be forbidden. Some members of my family put bowls of salt in rooms for protection. I don't know what it does. Jewish family members do. I don't know. I don't know what it's against. I don't, I don't know if it's something that, let's say, that sorcerers would do it per se. I don't know. It depends why. Depends why they do it. I don't know what it's what's the guard, what it guards for. Um, is it, question is what's it based on? Based on superstition? Is based on, going the ways of the non-Jews? Right? I don't know. I'd have to look into it to see what exactly it is. Could be nothing. It could be nothing, or it could be, it could be some sort of sorcery in some ways. Could be going in the ways of non-Jews. Could be any number. Could be any number of things. I'd have to look into it and see if there's any source for it. For see exactly what it is. If it's none of the above, then could a person do it? In theory, question is, does it work? Is it something that, is a provable thing that works? If it's brought down somewhere, that's a good, it's a good thing. It's a segula, it's an omen, it's a good omen to do for protection. Okay. There is you know, s- people have the custom, they put a book, small book, it's called From Raziel Malach, from I guess the angel Raziel, they, I don't know, have some sort of book that's written that's supposed to let's say a person has it on the bookshelf, it's supposed to stop against fires, having a fire in your house. So there are people that have that, right? That is the thing brought down somewhere. So there are things like that. There are things like that. Salt I haven't heard of, but doesn't it doesn't mean anything. So I have to look into it, see where it comes from. Yeah. Any other questions? Some of the things may be outrightly permissible. Yeah, I just, and have to see what it is. Some things may be forbidden because it's going the way of non-Jews, right? Or it could be sorcery, or it could be other things. Definitely could be. Um, um, people saying, let's just say like this, people saying negative things in Lashon Hara, that's bad. That's bad. It's not the evil eye though, right? That's not what the evil eye is. Evil eye is more about jealousy, more about making someone jealous. But even if someone speaks lashon hara against someone else, yeah, the Chol Vavo says you get all the mitzvahs. Now they don't keep mitzvahs, and okay, but Rabbi would say, I can't wait. I get to heaven, I get all the mitzvahs. All the people spoke negatively against me. So a friend of mine said, "You want their mitzvahs? You get all their mitzvahs, right? You get all their mitzvahs." So lashon hara in that sense doesn't work like a curse. Doesn't work like a curse. It can affect you for sure. People badmouth you, that for sure can affect you in many, many ways. Right? Not in the sense of an evil eye. It's a totally different thing. That'd be a totally different thing. Um Somebody asked, what if a Shabbos candle inflames my allergies? Um the question. I would say, have ventilation. Have ventilation where that doesn't have the effect, where the candles won't go out. Or put the candle somewhere where you're not going to come in contact with that much. Put it in the kitchen, right? Don't leave them on the living room, or light them somewhere and be in a place that's more ventilated, right? That's what I would say. If the evil eye is upon you, what should someone do? So you contact someone. If anyone in the States does it, I could find out. You contact someone to take it off if you think you have an evil eye. That's what you do. So do I know of anybody in the States that does it? Nope. I can find out. Probably find out. There are people that do it. Definitely know people here do it. But are there people there? Good question. Good question. That I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. But I can find out. I can find out. And the reason, keep in mind one thing. Keep in mind one thing. If something happens and it's normal, let's say something breaks, whatever, but it's normal wear and tear, that's not something to worry about. If it's something like above nature, like you have a number of things that happen above nature that are not normal, not normal in any way, shape, or form. That should happen. Yeah, then I would check it out. Then I would check it out. Or you have just a number of bad things happen like over a short period of time. Yeah, then I would check it out. But before that, you can chalk it up to a lot of things before that. You don't have to run to get it, to get it checked. But it has to be something above nature, like something that shouldn't happen. I had two things that, well, one thing that certainly was above nature that never should have happened. And something else shortly before that, in a very short period of time, right? So knowing that my Rabbi was very big into these things, so I asked him. Do is this a natural thing or not? And he's like, I know this is what you have. And like, my wife screamed. So, I wouldn't run to such a thing unless for sure, like there are certain things like what, like really above nature, or certain things like, a person took a number of setbacks, they got hurt, they got, I don't know, and any number of things that happen over a short period of time, or things that are like really out in the ordinary. Like one thing out in the ordinary, I wouldn't say, check it out. If you had a number of things happen in a shorter period of time, yeah. Yeah, then I would say it's probably something to look into. Um, Someone is jealous, yes. Yeah, go on my YouTube channel at Beyond Orthodox Conversion in Judaism and Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, Mishnah 16. I don't know, I have probably 15 classes at least on the evil eye, on ayin hara. So go watch those videos. Jealousy is a huge topic. I spoke about it for weeks, for months. So it's something, yeah, go look at those videos there. But yeah, jealousy is a serious thing. It's a very serious thing. If a person is jealous, but you didn't cause, they think you caused it, but you didn't, and they're jealous for no reason, that's not your fault. But if you did something to make someone jealous, then your file gets open and God's going to look in your file and see, and see if what the person said is really true. And if it's not true, then you have nothing to worry about. If it's somewhat true, you're in trouble, right? But I would want go watch those videos. I spoke about it a lot. Spoke about a lot of different contexts also. And how to find what jealousy is and all that. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I just every Tuesday and Thursday. 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time, or actually this week was 4 o'clock now when they changed clocks in the States. Saturday night, so go back to regular schedule for everyone. Otherwise, I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I get videos, Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com.